Welcome to a conversation with a community leader, sponsored by Leadership Kitsap. I'm Cary Bozeman, and I'm your host, and I'm the former mayor of Bremerton and Bellevue, Washington. And my leader guest today is John Clauson. John is the director, is the title?
Executive Director.
Executive Director of Kitsap Transit. So John, welcome.
Thank you, Cary.
Good to have you.
Nice to be here.
There's probably very few leaders in our community who more impact people in this community than you, John. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Great.
Before we get into all the things that you were involved with, passenger-only ferry, buses, et cetera, what brought you, and I know you're a Port Orchard City Councilman besides all that, what brought you to Kitsap County?
Actually,
Where are you from?
I was born and raised here in Kitsap.
You're local.
So yeah, I'm a native of Kitsap. Was born in Harrison, a couple of Harrisons ago, but yeah, lived in Port Orchard.
What'd your father do? What'd your mom and dad do?
My father actually managed a hardware store in Port Orchard for a number of years. Was Howe Hardware.
Well, that meant he knew everybody in town.
Well, exactly. And then he moved over and worked for Ike Parker and managed the hardware portion of the lumber store.
lumber yard. So you grew up in Port Orchard?
Yeah.
You go to South Kitsap High School?
Yeah, I
So,
sure did.
and you've had a career in your hometown. You don't still live in the home your parents grew up. You grew up in.
No, I don't.
No.
Close by.
Yeah, that's very few people can have that story.
Yeah.
There was an article in the Seattle Times yesterday about the Seattle population. Only like 2 in 10 were born in the Seattle community.
Yeah.
The rest of them came from other states or in many cases other countries. So you're a story that we don't hear that much anymore, John. So that must be kind of a great life.
Well, it has been, and I hope to continue it. But no, it's been interesting from the standpoint of watching not only Port Orchard but Kitsap County and Bremerton grow and change over the years. And population growth has been certainly noticeable. Traffic, for example. So
you serve on the Port Orchard City Council.
I do.
And some note I said, and I'm a former city council member of Bellevue, but I read where you have served for over 35 years.
Yeah, I'm actually finishing my 36th year.
That's I know that you had what's really fun about that is you also had a city council member who served longer than that, I think.
Actually, yes, Mr. Geiger, Bob Geiger was our senior council member. He served
I would
42
say
years.
You two men have served on city councils longer than almost anybody in the state.
Possibly.
I would guess. So let's talk a little bit about Port Orchard and your tenure on the council. What are you most proud of that you've done there?
Oh, there's been so many achievements that not me, but the city has been able to accomplish during the years that I've been there. Certainly, probably the most notable is the new city hall that we built in Port Orchard. That was a 10-year process to complete that. But
beautiful building. You used a local architect on that job.
We did.
Art Anderson.
Art Anderson in Bremerton.
Yeah.
And most recently, we just finished a new park out by McCormick Woods, the McCormick Village Park. That's really turned out to be beautiful and very much used by the community. And we're halfway through the construction of a pedestrian path along the waterfront in Port Orchard.
Yeah.
So, and then of course, probably the most recent is the completion of the expansion of Tremont from Highway 16 to the Port Orchard Boulevard, which was a big project for Port Orchard.
Well, I'm a port commissioner, so we have a big investment in downtown Port Orchard with the marina and the waterfront park and all that kind of thing. 35 years, John, what keeps you on the city council?
Well, it's interesting.
It's not like you don't have enough to do.
No, that's for sure. But it's always interesting. There's always something new to deal with. And for me, it helps. I kind of feel like I'm contributing to my community by doing that.
Yeah. Well, you are.
And it's a tremendous education. I mean, every year, even after 36 years, I still learn something new just about every meeting.
I give talks all the time, John, about one of the things about living in the life we live in is you always have to thirst for knowledge, and we learn things every day.
Every day.
Well, I was a Bellevue City Councilman for 16 years, and I thought that was a long time, and you've done double on that. So
yeah.
Did you ever think about running for mayor during those times?
No, not really.
Didn't
I like what I do. I really enjoy my job at Transit, and that's my
Yeah.
full-time job, where my
Yeah.
council position is more of a part-time.
Yeah. How much do you guys meet every couple weeks?
Yeah, we meet twice a week, or twice a month, I should say, as a council meeting. We have a third meeting every month, work study,
Right.
and then depending upon the committees and the time of year, you have committee meetings that you're
Right.
on.
You're not up for re-election this time.
Actually, I am.
Oh, you are?
I am.
I'll be darned. So let's go on to your regular life and your job, Kitsap Transit. How long have you been there, and what have you done there before you got to be the head man?
Actually, I've been at Transit about the same length of time that I've been on the city council. It's 36 years.
Yeah.
I started at Kitsap Transit as a bus driver 36
Oh,
years
you
ago.
did?
I did. I drove the first day of service in Port Orchard when this agency first started. And I essentially, over the years, have worked.
What year was that?
83,
83.
1983. And
And the Kitsap Transit, let's go back a little bit. Kitsap Transit, before it became a public agency, we had a private bus system over here, didn't we?
well, it was interesting. There was a municipal system in the city of Bremerton that was operated through a contract by a private operator. That private operator also had additional bus service that they ran, charters and
And they
things
call
of that
that,
nature.
what was the name of that system?
Bremerton-Charleston Transportation,
Okay.
and then Bremerton Municipal Transit was the
Yeah.
city's portion of
So
the
the
system.
city itself ran their bus system.
The city had
Wow.
a bus system that they contracted with the private operator to operate.
I'll be darned.
Mm-hmm.
So you started out working, but then how did that all transition into Kitsap Transit?
Well, the Kitsap Transit was actually formed by an election in late 1982.
1982.
And, yeah, it was in November of '82 that the voters voted to create a public transit system for Kitsap County. So I went to work in April of '83 when we first implemented service in Port Orchard. Just prior to we starting service in Port Orchard, we started in Paulsville. And that was the first that those communities had regular bus service. Now, during the war, there were a lot of buses that brought people to and from the ferries, primarily to work at the shipyard. But
Right.
so the buses actually started operating in those South and North Kitsap in April of '83. And then we took over the Bremerton operation and made changes to the service there in September of '83.
83. Yeah. So you are an American story. You started out as a bus driver and you worked your way up to be the CEO or the executive director of the company.
Yeah,
That's
pretty much.
That's a laudable thing to do in your life. It reminds me a little bit of, I've interviewed Bill Mahan, our friend, who became a county commissioner, and he was a milk truck driver.
Yep.
And ended up being the longest serving county commissioner in our county, 5 terms.
Yep.
Right. So
I worked with Bill. When
Oh,
I
you
first
did?
got on the city council, Bill was the county commissioner at
Yeah.
that time. Yep.
no, Bill's an amazing
He is.
guy.
He
And,
is.
well, that's interesting. So Kitsap Transit then goes back 80, so 1982. So was that 30, 40 years it's been around?
36 years, basically.
36 years. And to establish it, the county citizens had to levy is it a sales tax?
Sales tax. At the time, it was a combination of sales tax and a portion of the motor vehicle excise tax.
Oh, that's right. One of the best things I love about Kitsap Transit, and I think Dick and you got this start with the smaller buses where you're transporting people with special needs and senior citizens. What do you call that?
Well, in the industry, it's called paratransit.
Yeah.
Our program, we refer to it as access transit.
Access Transit, right. I think that's a great program.
It is. It's a wonderful program, and
Yeah.
it really helps a lot folks who
It
otherwise
does.
can't use the transit system.
Yeah. Do many other cities have that? And
Pretty
many
much
other
every
bus systems?
system in the U.S., it's a requirement of the Americans with Disabilities Act
Oh, it
law
is.
that you have to provide service 3/4 of a mile on each side of a fixed route for folks who can't get to the fixed route because of a disability. In Kitsap County, we do it countywide. We
Yeah.
don't limit it to just the 3/4 mile limit.
Yeah, you're amazing. There's also a service that you also run with the smaller buses.
Correct.
What's that called?
Well, we have a van pool program, if
Yeah,
that's
you
what
have-
you're referring. That's primarily for commuters, but the small buses we use both in our access program, as well as some of the outlying communities. We run smaller buses just because we don't really need to run the big ones at that
Well, one
point.
thing, my wife takes the bus once in a while from the ferry terminal to the house, and they'll basically let her off wherever she needs to be let
Yeah,
off.
that we refer to as our ferry take-home.
Yeah,
It's
that-
take-home
okay.
service.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a
talk-
pretty
talk
efficient
about,
way to
Talk
run.
about customer service.
Yeah, well,
right?
it's also very efficient for us. We're not driving down the street if there's not anyone there.
Yeah, good
So,
idea.
mhm.
So, how big is Kitsap Transit? How big an operation are you? How many buses do you run? How many people do you employ?
Right now, we have approximately 425 employees at Kitsap Transit. We actually have
Does that stay constant most of the time?
No, it's actually been growing recently
it?
because we've been expanding our routed bus service, not to mention with the creation of the fast ferry programs also.
You have trouble finding people?
Bus drivers, we do. We have a real challenge. We're in a constant state of recruitment for bus drivers.
Uh-huh.
We've been real fortunate in the stand-up of the fast ferry program that, hiring captains and deckhands has been relatively easy
Oh,
compared to the bus drivers.
oh. A lot of bus drivers retired people?
Yeah, a big segment of our employees this is their second or even third career choice.
So if somebody's looking for a part-time job or something, what does a bus driver job look like? How many hours? That
Well,
sort of thing.
it's pretty much what you want to work.
Oh,
We
is it?
can, because we're having trouble hiring,
Yeah.
you can come to work and almost start at 40 hours a week.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, but if there are a lot of folks that don't want to work that much, so we have pieces of work that we put together to try to accommodate the part-time type of an employment.
Uh-huh. Maybe a 20-hour kind
Yeah,
of job.
a 20-hour type.
People like that 20 hours, they get benefits of any kind?
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
they
do.
get full benefits, and as a public employee, we're part of the state retirement system as well as just a medical.
So that's a
and
nice opportunity.
It is. It's a wonderful
So
opportunity.
if anybody's looking for a part-time good job, you might call Kitsap Transit
Absolutely,
and be
absolutely,
a bus driver.
absolutely.
Yeah. So how many buses do you have out in the street?
Well,
What do you got going?
You know, it varies. I would just say from a rolling stock standpoint, we have about 400 vehicles. Now that's everything from buses to van pools to even our staff drivers, our staff
Right.
vehicles. But so my maintenance department reminds me that frequently that they're taking care of about 400 vehicles.
Wow. And your maintenance is still out there on the entrance coming into
Yeah.
by the shipyard,
Yep, in
right?
Charleston. Mhm.
Yeah. And so that's where you handle all your 400 buses and
That's where all the heavy maintenance done. Now we have two other operating bases, one up in Paulsbo and one in Port Orchard, that we do the light maintenance, the changing wiper blades and light bulbs and that sort of thing. But the heavy maintenance is done here in Bremerton.
how much does it cost to ride the bus?
Well, that's interesting. It depends upon your age and depends upon your income status. Normally it's $2 to take a ride on the buses, except we
do you have zones?
No,
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 no
it's $2 regardless.
$2 no matter where you're going.
Right. But you can qualify. We have a variety of categories for reduced fare, at which point it's 50%, so you would pay $1.
Pay $1.
Now that's for our access and routed program. Our worker drivers, which is a special program that's
Right.
devoted for primarily the shipyard.
Right.
The fares there are more expensive, and then of course the fast ferries that go to Seattle, the fares are
Do
different.
people put cash in a box like they used to?
Yeah, there's
Oh, they
still
do?
people that pay cash. Most of the fares are collected. We're part of the regional smart card program
Yeah.
that's referred to as ORCA.
Right.
The vast majority of our monthly passes and even people that want to pay occasionally will use the ORCA electronic card for their payment.
Okay, let's talk about Orca just for a minute. Now, you
Mm-hmm.
brought it up. Let's tell, what is that?
That's just a method for which you can pay your fares. It's an electronic, it's smart card. It's a
So you
card.
come in and hit a,
Yeah, there's a reader on the vehicles or the boats, whatever,
Right.
and that is a card that is accepted throughout the Puget Sound. There's 7 of us that participate from Pierce County, King County, and so on. You can load whatever kind of product that you want. So maybe you want a Kitsap pass and a King County pass. It's
So you
your
can
option.
ride the passenger-only ferry and the ferry and the
Yeah,
bus with it.
you can buy whatever combination that you would like. It automatically gets put onto that card, and then you just tap that card on whatever, whether it's Washington State Ferries or the light rail in Seattle. You use that same card to board any of us.
I know, John, that what you take in the fare box doesn't pay the bills.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
So transit systems are subsidized pretty heavily by citizens paying taxes.
Correct, and that's where the public transits were created back in '82. It took the voters to approve taxing themselves to support the operation. So
Right.
we are supported by a local option sales tax, and that covers just a bit over 80% of the cost. The rest of it comes out of
So
basically the fare
local
box.
sales tax covers about 80% of your costs. The rest comes from fare.
Yeah, and
Now-
some other incidental. We
Now,
have
the
a
Washington State Ferries, that's not the story.
correct.
Right.
Washington State Ferries has the advantage of carrying automobiles.
Yeah.
And as you may know, if you drive onto Washington State Ferries, your fares are quite expensive
High.
compared to $2 to walk on.
Right.
Or in the case of Washington State Ferries, if you're going, it's usually around $8.50, I think, now for a round trip on WSF.
But they, in my former career as mayor of this city, I had a lot of conversations with Washington State Ferries about the fact that the user was paying the biggest bulk of the cost to run that.
Right.
And that's pretty unique for a public transportation system in this country.
It is. It's very unique.
It's very unique, and I don't know that it's ever going to change much. Do you?
No, I don't see it changing unless the fares get so high. And of course, as you increase fares, you lose riders.
Right.
So then pretty soon you get to a point where there's such a small number of folks that are paying such a high price to ride that it's probably not worth it.
Yeah. So Washington State Ferries are basically being funded by the user. It's a user fee.
Well, and there's still a lot of it that's being funded by the state. We
Yeah.
all contribute to it.
Well,
so,
that's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. So what's your budget, John, to run Kitsap Transit?
Well, we break our budget in, actually now we break it into three parts. We have the transit operating budget, we have the ferry operating budget, and then we have the capital budget. If you combine all three of those together, and I will say we're pretty heavy on capital right now because we're buying ferry boats,
Right.
you're looking at about $115 million a year.
115 million. Okay. And the governance of Kitsap Transit, you have a board.
Correct.
Can we explain that board for me?
We are governed by a board of elected officials. They are on our board because of a position that they get elected to. They don't get elected directly to the transit board.
Right.
So, for example, the 3 county commissioners sit on our board. All of the mayors of the 4 cities in Kitsap County sit on the board. We also have an additional council member from the city of Bremerton, and then we have one position, they refer to it as at-large, that rotates. It's a 2-year seat, and it rotates amongst the 3 smaller cities. Currently, it's being held by a council member out of the city of Port Orchard, who just took the seat this year. Last year, it was held by a council member up in Paulsville. And then by state law, we also have one non-voting member that represents the 3 labor unions that represent the majority of our employees.
Yeah. I was on over on the other side, there's the metro system.
Correct.
Which is the countywide bus system and sewer system and a lot of things.
Right.
And I served on the Metro Council for a long time. And they've kind of done away with that now. I think the county
Right.
runs the metro system. But I see that Jim Ellis died the other day, and Jim's an old friend of mine. He's 98 years old, but
Yep.
he actually helped originally start and led the effort to build a King County Metro
That's what I understand,
system.
yes.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah.
He was an amazing man. To talk about budget, I know at one time a few years ago you had to cut some service because of cost. Where are you with service levels now, and is there some plan to expand service? Or are you pretty much where you are with that? And then I want to talk about the worker driver.
We are actually in an expansion mode.
Oh, good.
For
I say good. It must
Yeah.
mean you can afford it.
Well, it's one of those things that prior to the election of the Fast Ferry program, we've been operating the Port Orchard to Bremerton foot ferry for a number of years, and that was being paid for out of the bus funds. With the advent of the passenger ferry program, the revenue that comes in
And
now,
the establishment of revenue for that program.
correct, that took an additional vote of the community, and that's additional source of revenue. Ironically or interestingly, that revenue can only be used for ferries. It can't be used for subsidizing the transit.
Right.
But what we were able to do is we moved the cost of the Port Orchard operation into the fast ferry revenue, which freed up about $1.5 million a year back into the bus funds, and that's what we've been using to expand service.
Yeah.
So we've been into an expansion mode for a good year and a half now.
Wow. So we've restored some of the service?
Well, one of the things that we had to cut when the recession hit was Sunday service.
Sunday service, yeah.
And we spent 2 years looking at our existing service and working with the community to figure out how should we spend this $1.5 million. And depending upon who you asked, if you asked our existing riders, they wanted us to put Sunday service back. If you asked the rest of the community that currently doesn't use Kitsap but would like to, and what would it take for them to use it, they wanted more frequent, later and earlier evening and mornings.
Yeah, I can see that.
So we asked our consultant to try to develop a consensus, and the consensus was basically go more frequent. So we've not put Sunday service back, but we're spending that in increasing the frequency of buses on routes and things of that nature.
So let's go to worker driver. You happen to have this little company called the Shipyard with 15,000 employees.
It's the little one, yes.
And so you have a program called Worker
Correct, worker drivers.
What is that?
That's essentially, I guess the easiest way to understand it, it's like a van pool on steroids. Basically, a group of workers will come together, they will designate, I will volunteer to be the operator. They come to us, we train them, we get them licensed up, and then while they're driving the bus, we provide a bus. While they're driving the bus, they're actually our employee.
Is this actually a bus?
This is actually a bus. In fact,
Are
it's
those big white buses
I was
that
just
come
going to say,
pouring
it's
out
one
of
of
the
the
shipyard?
largest buses that we have in our fleet. Yes,
Yeah.
they're the big white ones.
And they hold what, 100 people?
No, they're
50?
they're probably around 50, just shy
50,
of 50
okay.
people. So they start up their bus, they go out and do their route, they pick up their co-workers, they bring them into the shipyard, drop them off. Then they park the bus, and then the driver goes in and becomes the employee of the shipyard and does their 8 hours, comes back out, gets the bus, and takes their folks home.
Yeah, it's a great program.
It's a wonderful program.
Does the shipyard help subsidize that?
No, they don't. Well, the federal government, not
Yeah,
specifically
the
the
federal
shipyard,
government.
but the federal government will pay the cost of a pass for any federal employee, whether you work for the IRS or the Navy or
Yeah,
whatever.
my wife works for a company, a Nordstrom company, and they pay for a pass
Yeah.
for their employees.
Yeah, it's pretty common, but to have the federal government do it is
Right.
I think it's great. But so they pay the cost of the bus pass, but no, they don't have any kind of direct subsidy in the operation.
Yeah. Do these buses end up going, and that's my next question about park and ride lots, do these buses go out to some park and ride lot where the people get off and go to their cars, or do they take them home?
They do both.
They
They
do
will
both.
drop people off on their way out, but they will stop at park and rides if it's along their route and pick
Right,
up and drop off.
right.
And then we park these buses out into the community. We have a lot of them parked at our various operating bases in Port Orchard and Paulsville, for example. We have some of them, though, that spend the night in a park and ride lot. And actually, there's a few of them that will spend the night in the driver's driveway.
Has the demand increased for the usage?
Well, it has, and then it dropped off. The federal
did it?
government made a big change to their pass program, which was a real discouragement for the employees, so that kind of dropped it off. And then certainly the congestion that we're experiencing out on 304 when you go out of town has been a real negative for the ridership.
Yeah, something's got to be done about that,
Yeah,
John.
yeah.
Having been the mayor of Bremerton, parking has been an issue for 100 years,
Yep,
probably.
Yep.
And when 15,000 people work within a block of you, and they don't have enough parking on the shipyard itself, what do you see as, and the shipyard's growing, and it looks like they're going to get a lot more money to do stuff at that shipyard in the next 10, 15 years. is one of the answers build some more park and ride lots
Yes.
out away from the shipyard where people can park and take buses into downtown Bremerton?
Yes. And a perfect example is right now we have a consultant that's looking for availability of property in the Port Orchard, South Kitsap area. We have a park and ride on Highway 16 at Mullenix Road. The next two interchanges before you get to Gorst is Sedgwick, and then the last one is the Old Clifton or Tremont. The consultants are looking for potential park and rides at those two intersections, Sedgwick and Tremont. The idea would be that we could capture people in a park and ride before they get onto Highway 16 and go through Gorst. So we're trying to respond to some of the congestion in Gorst as well. But we also, as an example, our new transit center that we're just finishing construction on in East Bremerton, we expanded and included a park and ride as part of that project.
As far as you know, John, and I know being on a port commissioner now, one of our other port commissioners is part of some kind of planning group that's talking about a new plan for Gorst interchange, right? Do you think in our lifetime we're going to see something happen in that Gorst interchange?
I hope so. I do think, I mean, one of the big choke points right now, of course, has been for years, is the railroad crossing in Gorst. That really chokes everything down. But I think, you know, the Navy's been at the table talking about expansions.
Well, they're worried about it.
They are. And, you know, we're looking at a number of different possible options. So,
I mean, it seems like it should be a high priority in the state transportation budget. But I don't know why we've never, you know, Belfair got $65 million to do a bypass, right?
Yeah.
And probably, speaking of Belfair, that highway going from the shipyard out to Belfair is becoming a real, real problem. So we need to do something there.
Well, fortunately, our friends at Mason Transit are going to be constructing a big new park and ride right on the county line.
Okay, I'm running out of time. I had too many questions for you.
Sure.
Passenger-only ferry, how's it going? Are you happy with it? You're going to start a new service in the south end pretty soon?
Correct. Yeah, no, it's doing very, very well. The vessels, now that we're getting some of the new vessels, we've got the backups that we need.
Right.
We just finished a 4-week test of running 2 boats out of Bremerton, and I got to say, I was impressed with the ridership on the second boat.
Great.
While not diminishing from the primary schedule. And as you mentioned, we're going to be implementing the new route from Southworth to downtown next year in 2020.
Right.
In fact, this coming Saturday, we have the first of the community meetings in the Southworth area.
You know, I'm predicting, and you know, I've talked about this, that we're going to see pretty significant growth in Kitsap County, partly because of the passenger-only ferry, because people working in Seattle can now come over here and buy a home and get to work in 40 minutes or whatever it is, 20 minutes. And we're 250,000 population now. I think we could get to 400 in the next 20 years.
I think you're right.
So, you know, that growth is a good thing in some ways, but it's also challenging because you don't have the infrastructure to support the growth. John, last question. You're a leader in our community. You're a leader of a major organization. What would you say is your leadership style?
Oh, that's a good question, Cary. You know, generally I manage by walk around. I have a wonderful team of directors and
so hiring good people.
Hiring good people and giving them the tools and getting out of their way and let them do their jobs.
Well, I think one thing for someone like you, you've grown up with the organization, so people have respect that, you know what's going on. And I think Kitsap Transit, my observation in 20 years I've been here, is well run, innovative. I mean, you kept getting out in front on this passenger-only ferry thing, and we failed a couple of levies, but my gosh, we got one passed. And I think it's really made a difference in the quality of life here.
Thank you.
So John, it was fun talking to you. Thanks for your service to the community.
Thank you, sir.
This has been another conversation with a community leader, and we'll see you next time, sponsored by Leadership Kitsap.